Dear students, today we'll start the third chapter on module 1, that is processes. So this is my first lecture on this chapter. So these are the contents of this chapter. So we'll start with the basic discussion of process concept. So after that we'll see process scheduling, operations on processes, and interprocess communication, a small chapter. So the objectives of this chapter are to introduce the notion of a process, a program in execution which forms the basis of all the computation. The second objective, to describe the various features of processes including scheduling, creation and termination and communication. The third objective, to describe the communication in client-server systems through IPC, interprocess communication. So we'll start the discussion with the concept of process. So what is process? So we know that the process is a program under execution. So when process execution must progress in the sequential fashion. So before this, again, on an operating system executes a variety of programs, and on batch systems we call the executing programs as jobs, and on time shared systems we call them as user programs or the task. So we saw that the process is nothing but an program under execution. So we know that whenever you want to execute a program, first you have to type that program. So to type that program you have to create a file. So in that file the program will be there. But merely having a program file will not give you the output. In order to get the output you have to execute that program. Okay. So that's why usually we call the program as a passive entity and the process as a active entity, because the outcome will be given by process, not by the program. But in order to create a process, the program should be there. Try to understand this. Okay, so that's what the process is. A process is nothing but a program under execution. So whenever you start executing a program, a separate process will be created. And we know that whatever the computer systems we use today, the modern computer systems, these are multi-user and multitasking systems. Multi-user means the number of users may be using your computer system at the same time. Okay, so whenever you create a program, so a file will be there on your system, but that program may be executed by so many users at the same time. No, so for every user, whenever you start executing the program, a separate process will be created. In other words, for a same program, the number of processes will be created. So that's what we call the program as a passive entity and the process as a active entity. So when we have a process, so process is having again the different parts of information. So in general we have divided it into 4 categories. So the process includes the text section, program section, that is program counter, the stack and the data section. So that can be shown here. This is a process in memory. Whenever you store a process on memory, so it occupies these particular segments. Here again, for every process it will be having some memory requirements, so that much amount of memory will be allocated for that process. That's why here we have shown this is the 0th byte of the memory allocated for the process, and this is the maximum size of that particular memory block. So whatever the memory that is allocated for the process. So as we saw in the previous slide, it is having the 4 information, that is text, it is having the data, heap and stack. So what it is text, as the name itself indicates, so whatever the instructions that the program consists of, so all those instructions will be present in this text part, textual information. Above this we have the data segment. So usually this data segment contains the global variable information, because in your program you will be having the declaration of the global variables and the global data. So all such information will be stored in this data segment. After this we have heap segment here and stack segment here, and here between this stack and heap we have a space which is shown in the other color. Okay, so here in this space you can see the two arrow marks. Okay, so from heap we have the upward arrow mark, and from stack we have the downward arrow mark. So what it indicates? It indicates the direction of growth. Okay, now before we say how this is going to grow, we should know what is the stack and heap. Stack is again a memory segment which is used by the process to store the temporary data. The temporary data means what? Whenever you in your program you may be having the number of user defined functions. So whenever a particular user defined function is called, your execution pointer will be moved from the called function to the calling function, calling function to the called function. So before this switch takes place, so whatever the temporary results you have with you for the calling program, so those should be stored somewhere. Okay, so where these are stored? So these are stored in this stack segment. Okay, so whenever a function is called, the execution pointer will move from the calling function to the called function. So before that, whatever the computation is carried out, whatever the temporary results you have with you, so all those informations are stored in this stack. Similarly, whenever you start executing the user defined function, okay, so there also whatever the temporary information or the results that you get before you get the final outcome, so all those informations will be stored in this stack segment. Okay, so that's why here there is no any fixed amount of memory for the stack. So as and when required, the stack may allocate the additional memory also. So that's why here whatever the free available memory is there, so this can be occupied by both stack and heap. So that's why here it is shown through this arrow mark. The stack can grow in this way, in the downward direction, in order to increase the memory that is allocated for this segment. Similarly, the heap can also grow in the upward direction in order to increase the memory that is allocated for this segment. Okay, so we saw stack. So now let us see heap. So what is this heap segment? So heap, it is used for the dynamic memory allocation. So the memory allocation itself is again the two types, that is static memory allocation and dynamic memory allocation. What is static memory allocation? So we know that whenever you write a program, you will be declaring the variables, and for every variable the certain amount of memory will be allocated. Okay, and that memory block will be used to store the value of that variable. So this is called as the static memory allocation. The same thing is true for the functions also, because the functions will also require the memory allocation. So for them also the memory will be allocated statically. Okay, before execution of your program. Before execution of your program means usually during the compilation. But whenever you start executing a program, so during the execution of your program may need to have some allocated memory for some other task. Okay, so in such cases you cannot allocate memory from the stack. You cannot allocate memory statically, because the static memory allocation takes place at the compilation phase itself. Okay, so that's why here during the execution of your program, if your program wants to allocate some amount of memory, so that memory allocation will takes place from heap. Okay, and that memory allocation is called as dynamic memory allocation. Why the word dynamic? Because the memory will be allocated during the execution of your program. Okay, means here also whenever a program is executing, so as and when required, so the memory should be allocated for that program. Okay, so that's why here the heap can also grow in the upward direction in order to increase the memory that is allocated for this heap segment. So this is about the process in memory. So after this we will see the process state. What is process state? The name itself indicates process state, means it indicates the status of your process presently. What is the nature of your process? Because we know that what is process, when a program starts execution, a process will be created, means the process will be running at all the time. So at any point of time you may want to know the exact status of that process, and that is represented by the state of that process. Okay, so usually a process will be executing that we know, and the process may change its state from one state to the another state. So the possible states are given here. Okay, we will discuss these one by one. So the first state is new state. So whenever a process is created, it will be present in the new state. Means whenever you start executing a program, a new process will be created, and by default it will be present in the new state. Okay, so after that the next state is running state. So when the newly created process starts executing the instructions that are to be executed by that process, so it will be in the running state. Okay, so after this the next state is waiting state. So during the execution of your process, the process may want to have access to some resource, or it may want to have some event to occur. Okay, so in that case, until that event occurs, the process should go to the waiting state. It should pause its execution. Okay, so during this period we say the process is in the waiting state. Okay, so after this the next one is ready. Ready means what? We know that by default whenever a new process is created, the process will be present in the new state. Okay, so from this new state it should be moved to a particular state from which it can be directly allocated the CPU. Okay, so that state is called as ready state. Okay, the name itself indicates ready means the process is waiting to be assigned to a processor. Means the process is ready for the execution and it is waiting for the CPU or the processor to start its execution. Okay, so after this the last one is terminated. So when the process finishes its execution, so we say the process is in the terminated state. Okay, so these are the 5 states through which the process will travel. Okay, so after this we have a diagram of the process state. Okay, so here in this diagram you can see how exactly the process will change its state from one state to the another state, and what causes a change of the state for the process. So we know that whenever you start a new process, so the process will be present in the new state. So when that process is admitted, means whenever it is ready for the execution, it will be moved to the ready state. So in the ready state, it will be waiting for a processor, okay, in order to start its execution. So whenever that happens, so whenever the scheduler dispatch, means whenever the processor is allocated for this ready queue, ready process, so the process starts executing the instructions. Okay, so when process starts executing the instruction, its state will be changed to the running state. So during this running state, again the several possibilities are there. Okay, so during this running state, let us consider a particular interrupt occurs. So in that interrupt, whenever the interrupt occurs, it may halt its execution, so it will be moved back to the ready queue. In the ready state means again the temporarily the CPU processor will be taken off from that particular process. Okay, and the process will be moved from the running state to the ready state. Okay, this is one possibility. Another possibility is during the execution, the process may want to wait for a particular event or the IO, that is some resource. Okay, so in that case the temporarily process should halt its execution, it should suspend its execution. Okay, so during that period, so the process will be moved to the waiting state. Okay, it will be waiting for a particular event or IO. So whenever that IO or event is completed, again it will be moved back to ready state. Okay, so from this ready, and whenever process is available, again it will be moved to the running state. Okay, so this is second possibility. Third possibility is whenever it completes the execution, so okay, so that is exit, so it will be moved to the terminated state. So again completion may be normal or abnormal, again it depends on the situation. Okay, so this is a process state diagram. After this, next we'll see the process control block. In short, it is called as PCB. Okay, So we saw that in the previous slide. Here we saw that the process will be continuously moving from one state to the another state. Okay. At the same time, we know that whatever the computer systems we are using, these are multi-processor systems. Okay. So whenever a currently executing process is there, so during this execution, if any other process request comes, and if your CPU want to execute that, the CPU will switch the execution from this present process to the next process. Okay. So whenever the CPU switches from one process to the another process for the execution, so before it performs the switch, whatever the information that is there with respect to that executing process, that should be saved somewhere. Okay. And where it is saved? It is saved in the process control block. Okay. So for every process, a specific process control block will be there, and this process control block will hold the information of the corresponding process. So here let us see what all things will be stored in the process control block. Okay. So it stores the process state. So already we saw what are the different states that are available. Okay. So whatever the present state of the process is there, so that will be stored here. So after that, next is process number. So we know that on your system the number of processes will be there. So for this system it is very difficult to manage these systems by their names. So that's why what your system will do is, for every new process it is going to allocate a unique number. Okay, it's an identification number. So that unique number is called as a process number. So through this process number only, each process will be handled by the system. So after this, next one we have program counter. What is program counter? So we know that program counter holds the instructions to be executed next. So we know that the process, whenever it is in the running state, it will be executing the instructions one after the other. So whenever it is executing an instruction, it should know which instruction should be executed after this. So that information will be stored in this program counter. Okay. So after this program counter, we have the registers. So again, the CPU will have the number of registers, like we have the accumulators, the general purpose registers, and so on. So all those registers information will be stored here. So after this we have the memory limits. So if any memory requirements or if any memory related information is there, so that is stored here, the limit information. And after that we have list of open files, means presently how many files have been already opened by the process. So all those information will be stored here. Along with this, again some more information will be stored in the PCB. So that we'll see in the next slide. Okay, so this is what the information associated with each process. In the previous with respect to the previous diagram, I think we saw about the process state, information, program counter, the CPU registers, these may be accumulators, index registers, stack, pointer, general purpose registers, and so on. Okay, along with this it will hold the CPU scheduling information also. Okay, because the CPU scheduling plays a very important role. What is CPU scheduling? Because we know that whenever the number of processes are executing and whenever the number of processes are there in the system, so it is not possible for the CPU to execute all the processes at once. Okay, so it should have some scheduling information, so that it will schedule the execution of those particular processes. Okay, so that information will be stored here. So after that, next one is memory management information. Okay, so memory management information means what? So the memory management means the name itself indicates the information with respect to the memory. Okay, means here it may have the information of the value of the base register, okay, the value of the limit registers, the page tables, okay, or the segment tables. So depending on the memory system that is used by the operating system. Okay, so all those informations are stored in this memory management information section. So after this, next in accounting information. Accounting means the accountability of that process. Okay, means presently what all information or what all things that a process is using. Okay, so it may include the amount of CPU, okay, and time used, okay, the amount of real time used, the time limits, account numbers, jobs, process numbers, and so on. So all this information will be stored in this accounting information. Okay, so after this, last one is IO status information. As the name itself indicates, here the information with respect to the IO devices that are already used, okay, or that are allocated for the process or for which the process is waiting. Okay, so all these informations will be stored in this IO status information section. Okay, so this is about the process control block. Okay, so we saw that every process maintains the process control block, and whatever the information that is with respect to that process, so it will be stored in this process control block, so that whenever a CPU switches from one process to the another process, okay, and after that whenever the CPU comes back for the execution of the previous process, so it will get all the information that is necessary to continue its execution from this PCB. Okay, after this we'll discuss the second point of this chapter, that is process scheduling. Okay, what is process scheduling? So in the previous slide itself we saw, okay, that is here we have something called the CPU scheduling information. So what is scheduling? So scheduling means we know that on your system the number of processes will be there, and the CPU cannot execute all the processes at the same time. Okay, so here the CPU should have some kind of mechanism so that it can execute the important or the priority processes first, and after that it will take up the processes which comes under the next level. So for that it will use a particular mechanism, it is called as process scheduling. Okay, so when it is having the process scheduling, again to store these different kind of processes, it requires the different data structures. Okay, and those data structures are nothing but the scheduling queues. So we'll see what are the different queues that the CPU holds with it. So namely we have the job queue, ready queue, and device queue. Okay, so whenever the number of processes are there in the CPU, so almost all the processes will be of the system will be stored in this job queue. Okay, so after this, next one is ready queue. So already in the previous slide also we saw this. So ready queue holds the set of all the processes residing in main memory and ready and waiting to the execution. So that's what, whenever a new process is created, so by default that process will be added to this job queue. So usually this may be present in the additional memory. So after that, whenever the process is ready for the execution, so that will be brought to this ready queue. Okay, means whatever the processes are there in the ready queue, so these are ready for the execution and these are simply waiting to execute. These are waiting to get the processor in order to start their execution. After this we have device queues. So it is the set of processes waiting for an IO device. Okay, so device queue is specific to every device. Every device is having a associated queue, it is called as device queue. And we know that whenever a process is executing, so it may want to have access to a particular device. So when the other process is using that device, so simply this first device should go to the waiting state. Okay, so whenever that device is waiting, so temporarily that process will be stored in the queue that is associated with that device. It is called as device queue. Okay, so we know that the processes will migrate among the various queues as and when required. So here we have a particular scenario where we have the ready queue and the various IO device queues. Here you can see the first one is nothing but the ready queue. Okay, ready queue means here it holds the processes which are ready for the execution, and we know that here every queue is having the head section and tail section. So after this head we have the PCBs of the various processes that are present in this ready queue. So here we have the PCB of process number 7 and PCB of process number 2. Okay, and after this the next queues are also available. So here we have the different device queues. So this device queue is for the magnetic tape, it is unit 0. Okay, so presently there is no any process in this particular queue. So after that we have one more device queue, that is for magnetic tape 2. That's also magnetic tape, it is unit 1. So here also you can see there is no any process. Okay, so after that we have one more device queue, that is for disk, it is unit 0. So here you can see in this disk queue we have 3 processes that are waiting, that is process 3, process 14 and process 6. Okay, so here each process is represented with their corresponding PCBs. Okay, and after this we have one more device queue, that is for terminal, it is unit 0. So here this terminal device queue also holds only one process, that is process 5. Okay, so in this way the number of different queues will be associated with the processes, and these will be present in the system. Okay, after this we'll see the queuing diagram of the process scheduling. So queuing diagram of process scheduling, the very important diagram. Okay, so this is one of the method for representing the process scheduling. Okay, so usually the process scheduling concept is represented by this queuing diagram. Okay, so here whatever the different queues we saw in the previous slide, so here we are going to see how exactly these queues will be used. Okay, so here you can see the arrow, the rounded and oval shapes will represent usually the resources, and the rectangulars will represent the queues. So we know that whatever these processes that are present on the system, almost all the processes will be stored on the job queue. So from that job queue, the system will take up the processes that are ready for the execution, and these will be kept in the ready queue. Means whatever the processes that are there in the ready queue, these are ready for the execution, and these are just waiting for getting a processor to start their execution. Okay, so that's why whenever a CPU is available, so a particular process will be allocated the CPU. Okay, so that is shown by this particular arrow. So whenever that process is executing, okay, so during its execution, so it may perform this particular, there are four possible things, sir. So during the execution, so it may want to access a particular IO device. Okay, so for that what it will do, it will send an IO request. Okay, so whenever it send an IO request, so that process will be moved from the CPU to the corresponding device queue, because IO is nothing but a IO device. For every device a separate device queue will be there. So with respect to which IO device it is sending the request, that process will be moved to that device queue. Okay, so it will continue to be there in the device queue until that device is available. Once that device becomes available, so that process will be allowed to use that device. Okay, and once it completes the execution, again it will be sent back to ready queue. Okay, so that after this, whenever the CPU is available, again it will be moved back to the CPU for execution. Okay, this is first option. The second option is the process may be having a associated time, execution time, and whenever its execution time is over, so it will be moved to the it will be expired, or it will stop its execution. That is the second possibility, that is whenever the time slice is expired. Okay, so the third possibility is the executing process may create another process by using a fork system call. So when that new child process is created, the child may start execution. So in that case, the parent will go to the waiting state. Okay, so once it completes the execution, the parent will again move back to the parent process will move back to the ready queue, and from this, whenever the CPU is available, again it will be scheduled. So the fourth possibility is the process may wait for a particular event or the interrupt to occur. So in that case, it will move to this queue. Okay, and whenever that interrupt occurs, so the process will be moved here, and after that again it will be moved back to ready queue. Okay, from this again, whenever the CPU is available, the process will start its execution. Okay, and here if any of these four possibilities are not there, so the process will continue its execution. Okay, and it will finish the execution, and when it finishes the execution, it will be terminated. Okay, so this is a particular flow of the process, and the process will move among the different queues based on the requirements. Okay, so this is shown through this particular queuing diagram of the process scheduling. So usually we have the two type of schedulers on the system, that is long-term scheduler and short-term scheduler. So as the name itself indicates, long-term scheduler means the scheduling is not frequent here, the infrequent scheduling will take place. And here in long-term scheduler, what it does is it is going to load the process from the job queue to the memory. Okay, means here based on this long-term scheduler only you will come to know the degree of multi-programming. So how many programs or how many processes will be executing at the same time. So it is going to select a process and it should be brought to the ready queue from the job queue. The short-term scheduler means, so here whatever the processes that are already executing by the CPU, so we know that the CPU may switch the execution of one process to the another process. So whatever the switching takes place, so that will be carried out by this short-term scheduler. So compared to this long-term scheduler, the short-term scheduler is going to switch very frequently. So that's why it is called as short-term scheduler. Okay, it is also called as CPU scheduler. So it selects which process should be executed next and allocates the CPU. And during the execution also, we know that based on the requirements, the CPU itself will be switching the execution of processes from one process to another process. So that will also be taken care by the short-term scheduler only. Okay. So that's what here the short-term scheduler is invoked very frequently that we saw. So it will be in terms of the milliseconds, whereas the long-term scheduler will be infrequently, it may be in terms of seconds or minutes. So the long-term scheduler consists of so that's why it indicates the degree of multi-programming, because the long-term scheduler is responsible for bringing the process from the job queue to the ready queue in order to start the execution. So the processes can be again described either IO bound processes or the CPU bound processes. The IO bound process means the process will consume its maximum time on the IO device rather than for the computing, whereas CPU bound process will consume maximum time for the computing, not on the IO. Okay. So after this we have one more scheduling between the short term scheduling and long term scheduling. It is medium term scheduling. Okay. So what is this medium term scheduling? So medium term scheduling means whatever the discussion I told you about the short term scheduling, so along with that, this medium term scheduling will also take care of that. Means here we know that presently a particular process will be there in the ready queue, and here whenever the CPU is available, so it will be moved to the CPU. So during the execution, so the processor may want to swap or may want to stop the execution of one process, and it want to start execution of another process for some other reasons. So in that case, here the medium term scheduler is going to move that process, or it is going to swap out that process from the CPU. Okay, and partially executed swapped out process will be stored here, and after some time it will be swapped in again back to the ready queue. This is one possibility. Another possibility is the process may go to the waiting state. So in that case also, it will be moved to the corresponding device queue. Okay, and after completion of that device execution, so it will be moved back to the ready queue. Okay, so here if any of these two things are not there, when it completes the execution, it is going to end. Okay, so here again for this also the medium term scheduling will play a very important role to swap out and swap in a partially executed process as and when required by the CPU. After this we have a very important term here, that is context switch, because till now we mentioned that whenever a CPU is executing a process, so it may want temporarily switch a process execution from one process to the another process based on the requirement. So whenever a CPU performs this switch, it is called as the context switch. Okay. So what is context switch? As when CPU switches to another process, the system must save the state of the old process and load the saved state for the new process via the context switch. So already we saw while discussing the PCB only, the process control block will save the information of all the information of that old process before the CPU starts executing the new process. Okay. So this context switch time is overhead, and system does no useful work while switching. So again the time dependent on the hardware support. So again some amount of time will be wasted here whenever a switching takes place from one process to the another process, and during this time the CPU will not be doing any useful task. So here a typical diagram to show how exactly this context switch takes place from one process to another process. So here we have two processes. One side we have process P0, another side we have process P1. So process P0 is currently executing particular instructions, and during the execution, let us consider an interrupt occurs or a system call. Okay, so what it will do? So it will move to the waiting state. So during this time the CPU may start executing another process. So that's why whenever this happens, so it will save its state into the corresponding PCB. So as we have considered process P0, it will be saved in its PCB, that is PCB 0. Okay, so here the context switch takes place. So context switch takes place means here from this P0 the CPU should start executing P1. So to start executing the process P1, it should load its PCB. So that is reloading state of process that is PCB 1. So here it is going to store the PCB 0 and it is going to reload PCB 1 in order to start execution of process P1. So during this time the CPU will be idle, it will not be doing anything, so it's a wastage of time. So here again it will start executing, okay, process P1. So after some time, so the process P1 may also want to suspend its execution. So for that again it will save its state to the PCB 1. Okay, after some time the CPU may want to resume its execution of process P0. For that it will reload the state from PCB 0 so that it can continue the execution of process P0. In this way, this is a simple example to show how exactly the context switch takes place from process P0 to P1 as per the requirements by the CPU. Okay, so this is nothing but a process the CPU context switching. Okay, so with this I will stop here and will continue the discussion of remaining part of this chapter in my next video. Thank you.